Okay, the first type of tree we're going to look at is actually an oak tree, just like the girls in the book. So it's kind of hard to see. That's the bottom of the trunk, and I just want to show you how the branches go out as they go up. This is a very tall and very old oak tree. Do you see how these branches come out? Let's go take a look at the bark. Okay, so here is a close-up of the bark of an oak tree. And I want to show you guys something cool you can do to sort of record the texture. If you feel it, it is rough, just like the girls said. You see how it's covered with lines that are not straight lines. So I'm going to try and take a rubbing of the tree, and I'll show you how to. Okay, so what you need to do a rubbing of the bark of the tree is you need a crayon that doesn't have any paper on the outside, because you're going to use the side of the crayon to rub. And you need a piece of paper. So what you do is you put your piece of paper up against the tree like this. And it's better, I think, if you have a flatter piece. But then you rub, oopsie, I broke my crayon. You rub the side of the crayon up and down against the paper. And it's kind of a cool way to record what the texture of the bark is for different trees. So I'm going to label this one as an oak tree so I remember which one it is. And when I go back and do my scientific drawing, I can look at my bark rubbing to try and make my bark look just like that. This one is a very small pine tree. And the reason I wanted to show you guys this was because remember how the girls in the story said that trees can be home to many different animals, and one of the animals that they listed was birds, and there is a nest up at the top of that pine tree. Can you see it in those top branches? It's a blue jay nest. So when you are observing your tree, take note of what different animals live in your tree, and also notice that trees come in different sizes. So this is a young pine tree. That oak that we just explored was hundreds of years old. This one is, I think, I would guess maybe 20 years old. We took a look at the bark on the outside of an oak tree trunk, and I wanted to show you this. This is from a tree from outside my house. This is what the inside of a tree trunk looks like. And they cut down this tree because it was sick and they couldn't save it. But if you look carefully, each of those little rings on the tree represent a year of the tree's life. So if you could count each of those rings, you would know how old this tree was. And here's an example of a young oak tree. So this was planted maybe about 20 years ago, maybe even less. This is the young oak tree in comparison to that big old oak that we saw. Okay, so here we have a tree of a different type of tree, and I want you to just notice, what do you think is different about these trees in comparison to the oak or the small pine that we saw? So notice where the branches are coming out of these trees, and notice how many leaves they have on their branches yet. So what I notice is that the branches are coming out much closer to the bottom than on the oak tree. The oak tree had a longer trunk before the branches came out. These are called sycamore trees. Let's take a close-up look at their bark. Okay, so you're going to notice that the sycamore bark is very different from oak bark. And if I feel it, it's sort of smooth. But you notice that there's patches of darker spots on the bark, and it's kind of peely. Those darker patches are kind of peely. and it's got a lot of these lumps on it. So if I were going to do an observation of this tree, I would want to make sure that I included those different colors in the bark and all of these lumps. This is a wooded area by my house, and most of the trees in this area are pine trees. So I want you to look at those trunks of these trees, and as we go up, look at the way the branches come out. It's hard to see because they're all next to each other, but there's not any branches on this trunk, and the trunk is sort of thinner than the other trunks we've seen so far. And these trees are very tall and pretty straight. And up at the top, they have lots of little branches that come out of the top. They don't have a lot of those big branches that we saw on the oak or on the sycamore. Let's check out what the bark looks like. Okay, so here's the bark of this pine tree, and it's very rough like the oak tree. It's a little bit more flaky, like there's lots of little pieces to it. And it's a little gray in the color. It's a little darker. Okay, the last kind of tree we're going to take a look at while we're outside is a maple tree, and that's the one that's over there behind that light post. I hope you guys can hear me. There's a little traffic. But look at the shape of that tree. Look at how the branches come out. And I also want you to notice that how many leaves are on it. So actually, we're right across the street from the sycamore trees over there. Look at how many leaves are on the sycamore tree. And now look at how many leaves are on the maple tree. All right? We're gonna take a closer look at that maple. Just wanted to give you a flash too. That is another kind of maple tree, and it has red leaves on it. Okay, so if we're taking a close-up look at this maple trunk and the bark, you notice that there's this yellow stuff growing on the bark and sort of blackishness inside there too. That's something growing. And the maple bark has really deep sort of grooves and crevices in it. And they're dark, and then the outside part is lighter. And just like in the book when the little girl talked about how trees can get hurt, I want you to notice, look at this big gash in this tree. And it looks like a spot where it maybe lost a branch there. And then on this side of the tree, it looks like there's lots of moss growing. Check that out. This is kind of a good find. That's really soft. So if I were doing a drawing of this tree, I would definitely want to include all that moss and that big gash in the tree. The last thing I want to notice here is the part of the tree that goes down into the ground. So if you look, this is the base of the trunk of our maple, and these here are the big roots that are going down into the ground. You can see one over here, sort of away from the tree. You can see one here going into the ground. Here's some more roots going into the ground. And look at what's growing at the base of this tree. Mushrooms. These roots at the bottom look very tangly, and I'm spying more mushrooms. And you can see how the roots get smaller when they go further away from the tree. The last thing I want to show you on our outdoor adventure, this is a oak tree, and you might notice there is a big hole in the oak, and I don't know if you can see it, but out of the hole is growing another little plant, and it looks like it's actually not an oak. It looks like a different kind of plant that has somehow made a home right there in the oak. Okay, the first type of tree we're going to look at is actually an oak tree, just like the girls in the book. So it's kind of hard to see. That's the bottom of the trunk, and I just want to show you how the branches go out as they go up. This is a very tall and very old oak tree. Do you see how these branches come out? Let's go take a look at the bark.